Now we are moving towards digitally connected defense forces, and from time to time we are hearing, of course, this topic. It's like an elephant in the room, that's why we have to talk about it. Chief Digital Innovation and Technology for NATO Communications and Information Agency, Luz Fernandez. Luz, welcome to the stage. Here we go. And let me remind you that you have to do also the evaluation. Please go to Slido and evaluate our sessions. It's very important. There are some questions. Please fill them in, and we will be better next time. Luz, good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. I'm going to start out by introducing myself. So my name is Luz Fernandez. I am Chief Digital Innovation and Technology at NCIA within NATO. NCIA is the NATO Communications and Informations Agency, and we are the tech and the cyber experts at NATO with a team of approximately 3,000 people spread across 29 different sites in Europe and in North America between civilians and the military. Today I'm going to talk to you about a topic which was just mentioned, which is digitally interconnected forces. Now, I must say, and going back a little bit about me, and I guess we have quite a diverse audience here. I joined NATO and the NCIA around 4 months ago. Before, my career was in industry. I was part of Amazon for the past year, where I was actually leading technology teams on network management and optimization. And many topics that I'm going to talk about today, we already saw in the civilian world and in use cases. So I hope that some of this can be familiar to you, not only from the let's say, military perspective, but also from the civilian use case. So going back to the topic, digitally interconnected forces. Today, we're faced with a geopolitical landscape that is extremely complex, and it is interconnected. And you've heard in previous talks how this doesn't only demand us to keep up with the rapidly evolving technology, but it also demands that our allied forces drive technology from a digital transformation part. We need to look at digital and interconnectivity as a key part of defense, and we start looking at things like reliability, at things like flexibility, at things like security by design, with a much wider view. At NATO, we look at a future that speaks about resiliency, it speaks about having strategic advantage of our forces, and we look at how we can tackle this rapidly evolving world. So let me start out with a metaphor, and you're going to see probably in the slides that you're seeing a picture. When we talk about digital transformation, and I'm going to take you to a metaphor. Imagine, and you see on this picture what we have. We have a spoon. So let's say this could be perfectly in a foundry where you could be melting metal. And when you melt metal and you make it liquid, you will see how that metal starts adopting different shapes, and it starts adopting different forms. And the components of that metal start to mix. Well, digital transformation is similar. When we start off a transformation process and we look at existing infrastructure and the existing digital infrastructure, we more or less have the same process. Everything melts, everything takes different shapes and forms, and there's things that come into play, like interconnectivity, not only as a need, but also interconnectivity among systems, not only allied forces. At NATO, or at NCIA specifically, through this vision, we have designed a concept called the NATO Digital Foundry, which is an ecosystem which fosters innovation, it fosters experimentation, it looks at that interdependency and that interconnection. The NATO Digital Foundry comes as part of the NCIA technology strategy. Just a few weeks ago, we presented the NCIA technology strategy in an event at The Hague. We presented a working document, and we did it through a consultation session. It was not a formal presentation. The formal presentation will be at NATO Edge, which is taking place in December in Florida. In this consultation event, we gathered people from industry, we gathered NATO stakeholders, and we also gathered non-for-profit and academia to show, among other things, the 6 key technology themes that we have defined as key pillars towards 2030 to enable NATO's digital transformation. We also looked at critical success factors, which I have not mentioned here because it would give us for more than 15 minutes of a talk. But we also looked at critical success factors like people, like processes, like looking at different levels of maturity, like how do we upskill and prepare people, not only allied forces, let's say, but also the infrastructure that's behind to keep up with this. The 6 key technology pillars that we identified, you see them here, are quantum, which is our most forward-looking one. We also have data exploitation, which would be everything around AI, but not only AI, also where do we exploit the data, how do we exploit it, and so on. We also have space, which is a recent new domain that of course, we need to look at. We also have cybersecurity and cyberspace, and cybersecurity is something that needs to be implemented by design in everything that we do. And then we also look at cloud computing, and we look at next-generation networks, which is something that is being spoken about a lot today in the Territory event. I'm not going to go through each one of them, because again, it would take me much more than 15 minutes, but I wanted to speak about specifically 2. The first one would be cloud. And you might say, why cloud if we're talking about connectivity? Well, because connectivity alone does not equal digital readiness. We need the proper infrastructure, and we need to be able to have something that has been spoken about here today already, which is interoperability. When we talk about interoperability, we not only need to talk about interoperability of systems, which is key, but we also need to talk about interoperability of allied forces, which is a different topic, and it might be dependent on systems. What cloud does is it enhances and it allows us to build the resiliency, the flexibility, the security that we need to enhance that connectivity. And at NCIA, we're working on cloud, just like we're working on the other 6 key technology pillars. As I mentioned, this is not the only one. They're all interdependent and they're all highly interconnected. But it is key for us to have the right infrastructure to support that connectivity. And then we can start to talk about interconnected forces. When we look at 5G, for example, and beyond, we know that it enables data throughput, and it also enables edge computing, which is something that is critical for field operations today. Imagine our forces deployed in complex or hostile environments. And imagine them having access, for example, to real-time analytics, or imagine them having access to real-time situational awareness, or being able to communicate with their command centers as fast as possible with no latency, let's say, so that they could enable rapid decision-making, which is one of our key objectives. At NATO and at NCIA, that is our key goal. And we are doing this across different lines of collaboration, investigation, execution of different programs and projects and partnerships that we have. How do we do this? So we do this through, let's say, 3 different branches. The first one is awareness and influence. So we do a lot of technology watch. We look at 5G and beyond, of course. We look at specific future use cases and current use cases, and we develop scenarios. And we look at different systems that could be useful for those scenarios, for example, on tactical operations, or for example, on maritime operations, going back to the keynote that you just heard. We also look at how to establish capability development. So we experiment, we test, we develop MVPs. We take those scenarios that we've designed, let's say, and we see what is the capability that is needed. We also, and this is key to us, ensure security. We ensure security, and we do it by design on 5G and on IMT standards. We look a lot at standardization, which is something that we need to talk about when we look at digitally interconnected forces. What are we involved in today? So within NCIA, we have different branches of action. We not only have the technology strategy, which I just mentioned, which is an ongoing effort, and we collaborate, like I said, with different industry partners, with different academia, and non-for-profit, and we also collaborate with our different NATO stakeholders. We are also involved in how do we spread those reference use cases? How do we conduct background investigation work. To give you one example, we had a study on 5G along with the University of Aveiro in Portugal. I might mention, some of you might be familiar also with NATO's sweet spot on 5G study that was conducted with a consulting company in this case, which actually looked at the possibility and future scenarios on 5G. We've been doing this since 2019, and it has evolved. We have another project that we have just established, which is the multinational 5G project, which is a multinational effort with different countries in which we look at specific use cases and how 5G can enable and can give strategic advantage in different aspects or scenarios to our allied forces. And we do this in an informed and in an unbiased way. We are also part of different advisory councils. So there is currently an ongoing European Multinational Advisory Council on 6G, and NCIA is part of this, looking, like I said, at future scenarios where this could be used. We have two main challenges here, and this is what I wanted to leave you with, let's say. The first main challenge is that when we look at commercial applications today on the market, the case for specific defense use cases, or the existence of specific defense use cases, is very little. We have a lot of commercial applications on anything related to next generation networks and everything related to communications and interconnectivity, but we do not have a lot of use cases where it can be applied for defense. And we need you, in this case, if you're in industry or in NFPs or in academia, to help us with that collaboration and that definition of use cases. The second big challenge is isolation. I'm sure that you've heard before presentations on digital transformation, which is a much wider concept on how we need to collaborate and everything needs to be smooth and everything needs to be transparent. And it was just mentioned here on the panel on IA, for example, on AI, sorry. When we look at the progress that's being made today on communications, it is isolated. We see there is a lot of research going on in different academic bodies. For example, we see companies that have and are developing specific technologies and specific applications. We see that nations also invest in different efforts towards communicating and being connected, but that collaboration needs to be enlarged so that we can actually be a wider digitally interconnected forces across the aliens in this case. And this is where I'm looking at you. So, in the same way that with our technology strategy, we have involved academia, non-for-profit, and we have involved different NATO stakeholders, when we look at interconnectivity, collaboration is key. So each of us have a role in this, whether you're in a lab doing research or if you're part of a company looking at the future of 5G, 6G, beyond, when we look at a defense perspective, or if you're part of any sort of nation body. How, and I will leave you with this question, how can we enlarge those partnerships and make that collaboration larger so that we can actually be, let's say, a wider force? Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor for questions, I guess, or he will open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, Luz. So, any questions? If you dare, of course, please put up your hand. You don't have to name your company and a name, just ask your question. Where's the microphones? Down there? Yeah. So, the audience? Yeah, I know, that's quite tricky. I have one question. Are we safe?
Okay.
Are we safe?
Are we safe? That is a very good question, and that is a very difficult question to answer. I would answer it in the sense of how much more safe can we be? And we can certainly always be safer as we move forward with the different technologies that we have at hand. Like I said, and I just showed you, and again, it would give me for another talk. We have 6 different key technology pillars that we're working on. And of course, NCIA's mission and NATO's global mission, let's say, is to precisely keep 1 billion citizens safe. As we keep on looking at use cases, not only from the perspective of how do we start using technology, but from the perspective of how do we look at the different threats that we have with the advancement of technology across quantum, across cloud, across across next generation networks, across artificial intelligence, data exploitation, everything around cybersecurity, and of course space and cyberspace, which are 2 domains, we will be able to be more safe.
And on regulation side, are you in any way covered by European legislation, and are there regulations you would like to be, I don't know, changed, adapted? Where are we now? Because we are on strategy and policy and strategy stage. So.
Well, I can speak, of course, I'm part of NCIA, and NATO is a very wide world, but I can tell, for example, that we do have a specific body, which is NATO digital staff, and they take care specifically of policies. And if you're familiarized with NATO, one key example is the strategy on 5G and the policy on 5G that was issued, I think, a year ago by the NATO digital staff. So everything we do, yes, we look at it from a policy perspective as well.
Thank you, Luz.
Thank you.
Thank you.